the International Relations Department, saying due to the ongoing rescue and recovery operations, the remains of the foreign nationals recovered from the collapsed structure are likely to be repatriated by the weekend. Officials also appealing for donations yesterday to help return the bodies home. Deputy International Relations Minister is Alvin, who joins us now for this leg of the conversation. Deputy Minister, good evening to you, and thank you very much for your time. Just as a way of confirmation, are you able to tell us which missions in South Africa have you been in touch with about their nationals possibly having been among those who've died in this collapsed building?
Good evening, Collie and Newzroom Afrika viewers. We have had interface with mission representatives from Malawi, Mozambique, and obviously Zimbabwe, Collie.
And these countries, Deputy Minister, my colleague on the ground is saying that their home countries, or the nationals who are here in South Africa, their home countries are not willing to assist with repatriations. Is that the same message you are getting from the missions?
Well, remember, you know, all countries have in their foreign policy repository, you know, a mechanism entitled consular services. However, throughout the world, the consular services doesn't ordinarily encapsulate the repatriation, you know, of private citizens in the event of untimely death. That is also, Collie, the policy of the South African Department of International Relations and Cooperation. However, be it as it may, this is an unprecedented tragedy. It's you know, it's the biggest disaster that have befell the building industry since the advent of democracy 30 years after our freedom. And therefore, there is ongoing engagements with the heads of missions. There's ongoing engagements in the Department of International Relations and Cooperation. But we have made a call yesterday for South Africans and you know, the private sector, in particular the developer and constructing company involved, to actually come to the fore to contribute to the repatriation process of deceased.
Is that in the main who the department is looking to in order to assist with repatriations? The developer, Neotrend, as the names go, or is it Leotel? This is the actual construction company that was on site.
Well, Collie, private capital should not only have at its assets priority the accumulation of capital and making profits. There should be a minimum expectations from us in relation to the moral compass and moral obligations of both the developer and the contractor. So we are making a public call to those two enterprises to join hands with the mission representatives of the identified and mentioned countries as a way to collaborate in realizing the actual repatriation of the deceased. And that is our minimum expectations, even from the side of the government, Collie.
It is a moral obligation, Deputy Minister, as you put it, to these companies that are involved here to come forward and assist, as they have been quoted in newspapers as saying. Now, up until this moment, I have not heard either colleagues on the ground saying that they have seen at least one company official coming forward just to pay their condolences in person. The likelihood here is that these companies may not, at least in the immediate, be forthcoming. At the same time, I predict and this is not scientific, I'm not involved in this business, but the predictions are that mortuaries cannot be able to keep bodies in their facilities for the foreseeable future. And so at some point, they're going to have to be buried. Do you think that these companies are going to eventually come out? Perhaps you may have a direct message to the companies involved.
Yes, thank you very much, Toli. It will be highly regrettable that in the land of Nelson Mandela, in the land that has came to be known for its Ubuntu diplomacy and human solidarity, that private capital that has to display a moral endowment refuses to rise to the occasion. At this stage, our immediate priority as government is obviously to call on the enterprises involved to lead the way, firstly, to make a public declaration in relation to be in solidarity with the families of the deceased. So that is the first issue. The second issue is to make a public declaration in relation to their financial contribution towards the repatriation of the deceased workers. That at this current moment, colleague, is the minimum expectations that any corporate that have workers in this instance on their payroll should be able to demonstrate. This is who we are, South Africans. This is who we are as the descendants of Nelson Mandela. So that is our minimum expectations. However, colleague, you would know that the number of non-state actors, such as Love George and Give of the Givers, have voluntarily, provided substantive support to the families, at the adjacent George Community Hall. And we want to give accolades and give credit where credit is due for that selfless display of human solidarity. And we want to be unequivocal to call on the private capital in its totality. We need more good news, in this tragedy that have befell the George community. And that good news, colleague, should be where the companies involved display a moral compass and display minimum moral consciousness.
Final question to you, Deputy Minister Bottas. Would it be a valid excuse for these companies not coming forward to say, we are in all likelihood in trouble here because suggestions are being made that some of these workers may not necessarily have been on their payroll as such, and therefore there may have been, and again, I'm using very careful language here, not to use definitive terms. There are suggestions that some of the workers on that site may not have been properly registered with the companies.
Yes, Collie, look, at this stage, when we look at the liabilities that should obviously be applicable in this regard, those are issues that would, in the next couple of months will be obviously brought to the public fore through the necessary investigative processes, given the fact that the South African police services have declared the building site as a crime scene. So it is being treated as such that there could have been possibly criminal conduct. So that is what subs, have obviously related to us. But be it as it may, Collie, when there is a difficulty that confront, any company, there should be within its rehab, given the fact that it had made a commitment of constructing this building for the amount of 39 million rand. There should be a minimum commitment, probably not even 5% of its initial investment towards the repatriation. So we are calling on these two South African enterprises that has been cited, both the developer and the contractor, to provide, a pedigree of leadership, albeit that there may be anxiety from themselves. But in the eyes of the South African public, everyone are looking up to these companies to provide a pedigree of being South Africa on the occasion of 30 years of celebrating our democracy. It just cannot be. It's completely un-African, Collie, for the companies, the directors, the trustees, the shareholders to be oblivious to the plight of workers that participated in their objective of constructing this development.
Deputy Minister, I know I said that was the final question. I'm expecting a fellow minister to join immediately after you, and he'll be talking on the same story. Can I just squeeze in one last question? And it has to do with the intimations that some of the nationals, foreign nationals, who were working on that site may not have been documented. And again, I'm being careful with my language, may not have been documented properly to be in this country. Normally, what do you find as a department of foreign of international affairs or foreign affairs? What do you find to be the attitude of missions where a deceased person is of either Zimbabwean origin, Mozambican or Malawian, but they've sadly died in South Africa, but because of documentation that possibly does not exist, what normally is their attitude that they display toward their nationals, the repatriation of their nationals?
Well, Corey, substantively, our engagement with the mission representatives from Malawi and Mozambique, in particular yesterday, is one of unity, in times of this type of tragedy. So there is regulatory issues that has been pinpointed, but substantively, we are trying to engage in relation to what can be done. But of course, Collie, like those countries, the South African government, in this instance, are obviously looking at the conduct, the response, and the participation of the identified, developer and contractor. And it will be rather highly unfortunate that while South African companies are doing business elsewhere in Africa, elsewhere in the SADC region, that one of their own, amidst a unprecedented tragedy that befell the building industry, are not able to rise to the occasion. You may recall, Cole, we have a number of multinational companies from South Africa that are present in Malawi, that are present in Mozambique. And there is a minimum expectations that, being South Africa means to exercise Ubuntu diplomacy and to display a level of, human solidarity. And we are making, once again, it's the second time, concurrently that we are making this call to the private sector, not only those that are affected, but those private sector that has a moral conscience to join hands with the embassy representatives and the South African government to bring about the speedy repatriation of the deceased.
Thank you very much for your time.